Before I start this story, I need to give you a warning that might completely change the way you're about to watch this. The ending of this story is so shocking, so unexpected, that many people simply don't believe what they're seeing. But here's the most important part. YouTube only delivers the ending to people who are subscribed to the channel. If you don't subscribe right now, you won't see anything. So do this before we continue. Subscribe right now, hit the like button, and comment the city you're watching from. We love knowing how far these stories reach. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, each droplet a tiny explosion against the glass that seemed to mirror the chaos in Isabel's heart. The storm had rolled in from the Atlantic that afternoon, turning the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blacks, the kind of weather that made people hurry home early and lock their doors against the wind. But Isabel Wagner had no such luxury. She stood before the massive mahogany desk, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her chin raised in defiance, despite the terror coursing through her veins like ice water. Her clothes were soaked from the journey here, a cheap raincoat that had done nothing against the deluge, jeans that clung uncomfortably to her legs, sneakers that squelched with every movement. She looked like a drowned rat and she knew it, but she refused to let that diminish. Refused to cower before the man who sat across from her like a king on his throne. Before you dive into this unbelievable story with a shocking ending you won't see coming, make sure to subscribe to our channel right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next, and there are so many more incredible stories waiting for you. This one will leave you breathless. The office itself was a testament to obscene wealth and power. Original paintings hung on the walls. She recognized a Monet, a Picasso, works that should have been in museums, but instead adorned this private sanctuary of corruption. The carpet beneath her feet was so thick and luxurious that her sneakers sank into it, Persian silk that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition at Columbia. Everything in the room screamed money, power, danger. The kind of danger that didn't announce itself with guns and threats, but with silk ties and expensive cologne, with leather-bound books and crystal decanters, filled with liquor that cost $1,000 a bottle. Across from her sat Victor Constantine Blackwood, a man whose very name sent shivers down the spines of New York's most powerful criminals. She had heard the stories, whispered in the shadows of the city, tales of a man who had risen from nothing to build an empire on blood and fear. Some said his father had been a Russian mobster who had fled to America in the 90s, bringing with him the brutal efficiency of the Soviet underworld. Others claimed Victor had killed his own father to take control of the organization, that his first act as leader had been patricide. Isabel didn't know what was true and what was legend, but as she looked at him now, she believed every dark rumor. At 35, Victor Constantine Blackwood had built an empire that straddled the line between legitimate business and the dark underworld. A king in a suit worth more than most people's annual salary. His eyes were the color of steel in winter, cold and unforgiving, yet somehow beautiful in their intensity. The kind of eyes that could strip away every defense, every lie, every pretense until you stood naked before him in every sense of the word. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and when he clenched it, as he often did, a muscle ticked beneath the skin that spoke of barely controlled violence. His hair was dark, almost black, cut in a style that was both professional and vaguely threatening, swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. He wore a three-piece suit in charcoal gray, the jacket hanging on a stand behind his desk, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories he would never speak aloud. His hands, resting on the desk, were the hands of a man who had built things and destroyed them with equal facility. Long fingers, immaculate nails, but with calluses and old wounds that spoke of a youth spent fighting for survival. His presence filled the room like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. Even sitting, he dominated the space, radiated an authority that had nothing to do with his position and everything to do with who he fundamentally was. This was a man who had looked death in the eye more times than Isabel could imagine and had never blinked. This was a man who had made impossible choices and lived with the consequences without flinching. This was a man who could order someone's death with the same casual ease that others ordered coffee and sleep soundly that night, knowing he had done what was necessary. Isabel had read about men like this in books, seen them portrayed in movies, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. The air around him seemed to crackle with potential violence, with barely leashed power that could be unleashed at any moment. She could feel it pressing against her skin like a physical force, making her want to run, to flee, to get as far away from this office and this man as humanly possible. But she couldn't run. Her father's life depended on her staying, on her facing down this monster and making a deal that might damn them both. "Your father," Victor said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey but laced with poison, each word deliberate and measured, "owes me $3 million. $3 million that he gambled away in my casino over the course of 6 months, thinking he could beat the house, thinking that his luck would change, that the next hand, the next roll, the next spin would be the one that would make him rich beyond his wildest dreams." He leaned back in his leather chair, the expensive material creaking softly, and steepled his fingers beneath his chin in a gesture that was both contemplative and vaguely menacing. "The problem, Miss Isabel Wagner, is that your father doesn't have $3 million. He doesn't even have $300,000. According to my sources, he has exactly $4,217 in his checking account, another $800 in savings, and debts to at least 3 other institutions that total somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000. He has nothing but a daughter who walked into my office with fire in her eyes and foolishness in her heart, thinking she could somehow negotiate with me, somehow convince me to show mercy to a man who showed no mercy to himself." Isabel felt each word like a blow to her chest. She had known her father was in trouble. Had known for years, really. Ever since her mother died, and Johannes had thrown himself into gambling as a way to numb the pain. She had watched him spiral, had tried intervention after intervention, had begged him to get help, to stop before he destroyed everything. But addiction was a cruel master, and her father had been powerless against it. She had thought she understood the scope of his problem, had thought she knew how bad things had gotten. But $3 million. The number was so large, it didn't even feel real. It was more money than she would earn in a lifetime, more money than she could even conceptualize. How had he lost that much? How many hours had he spent in that casino, feeding coins into slot machines, placing bets on card games, chasing a dream that would never materialize? "My father," she began, her voice shaking but determined, "is sick. He has an addiction. He needs help, not punishment. He needs treatment, therapy, support. What he did was wrong, but he didn't do it out of malice. He did it because he's broken, because he can't control himself, because the gambling owns him in ways you can't possibly understand." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Was it understanding? Pity? Contempt? Isabel couldn't tell. "I understand addiction," he said finally, his voice softer than before but no less dangerous. "I understand what it does to people, how it hollows them out from the inside, how it makes them into shadows of who they once were. My father was an alcoholic. He drank himself to death by the time he was 52. His liver destroyed, his mind rotted by years of abuse. I watched him deteriorate, watched him become a monster in his final years, violent and unpredictable and cruel. So yes, Miss Wagner, I understand addiction, but understanding doesn't change facts. Your father owes me money, a great deal of money. And in my world, debts must be paid. That's not cruelty, that's simply the way things work. If I forgive your father's debt, word will spread. Others will think they can take advantage of me, that they can gamble in my establishments and walk away when things don't go their way. I can't allow that. I won't allow that. My reputation is built on certainty. People know that when they deal with me, I will honor my agreements and expect the same in return. Breaking that precedent would be the beginning of the end. Isabel understood the logic, hated it, but understood it. In Victor's world, mercy was weakness. Compassion was a liability. To survive, to maintain his position, he had to be ruthless, had to enforce every debt, collect every payment, no matter the human cost. It was a cold, calculating way to live, devoid of empathy or humanity. And yet, as she looked at him, she saw something in his eyes that suggested he didn't enjoy it, that perhaps the monster he had become was a role he played rather than his true nature. Or maybe she was just desperate, seeing what she wanted to see because the alternative was too horrific to contemplate. "So what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed into those 7 words. She was 26 years old, a graduate student in art history at Columbia University, with dreams of working in museums and galleries, of surrounding herself with beautiful things, and helping others appreciate the artistry of the ages. She had no business standing in the office of a man who could make people disappear with a snap of his fingers. She had no experience in this world of violence and corruption, no street smarts or survival instincts honed by years of hardship. She was, by every measure, a lamb walking into the den of a wolf. But here she was, because blood was blood, and family was family, even when they destroyed your life with their selfishness and weakness. "What do I want from you?" Victor repeated, as if tasting the words. He stood, unfolding himself from the chair with a grace that seemed at odds with his size, and walked to the windows. The rain continued its assault, streaking down the glass in rivulets that caught the light from the city below, transforming the windows into abstract art. He stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, staring out at Manhattan spread before him like a kingdom. "I want your time, Miss Wagner. I want your obedience. I want your complete and total submission to my will for a period of 12 months. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her blood run cold. 1 year of your life, 365 days. You will do exactly as I say when I say it, without question or hesitation. You will be mine to command, at my disposal, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You will have no life outside of serving me, no friends, no social engagements, no personal time unless I grant it. Every breath you take, every move you make, will be with my permission. At the end of that year, if you have fulfilled your obligations satisfactorily, your father's debt will be cleared. He will be free, and so will you. You'll never see me again, never have to think about this year, never have to remember what you sacrificed for a man who probably doesn't deserve it." Victor's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a different man, but on him looked predatory. "I want you to work for me. 1 year of your life, Miss Wagner. 365 days. You will do exactly as I say when I say it, without question or hesitation. You will be mine to command, and at the end of that year, your father's debt will be cleared. He will be free, and so will you." The words hung in the air like a noose. 1 year. It sounded simple, almost reasonable, but Isabel knew better. Men like Victor Constantine Blackwood didn't make reasonable offers. They made deals with the devil, and the price was always higher than it seemed. "What kind of work?" she demanded. Taking a step closer to the desk, rain continued to batter the windows, the storm outside matching the one brewing in the room. "I'm not a criminal. I won't hurt people. I won't—" "You will be my personal assistant," Victor interrupted, his voice cutting through her protests like a blade. "You will manage my schedule, attend my meetings, accompany me to social events. You will be at my side at all times, ready to serve my needs." The way he said "needs" made her skin prickle with unease. "And, yes, Miss Wagner, you will do exactly as I tell you. That is the arrangement. Take it or leave it. But know this, if you leave, your father will pay his debt in ways that will make you wish you had said yes." The threat was clear, unmistakable. Isabel thought of her father, weak and broken, drowning in his addiction to gambling and alcohol. She thought of her mother, dead 5 years now from cancer, who had made Isabel promise to always look after him. She thought of the life she had built, the dreams she had cultivated, all of it crumbling like ash in her hands. "I need guarantees," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I need it in writing. A contract that says after 1 year, the debt is paid in full. No extensions, no loopholes, no fine print that keeps me trapped forever." Victor's eyes gleamed with something that might have been admiration. Most people who walked into his office left trembling and broken. But this woman, this Isabel Wagner, with her auburn hair and green eyes that blazed with determination, she stood before him and made demands. It was intriguing. "You have spirit," he said, rising from his chair. He was tall, easily 6'3", and as he rounded the desk, Isabel had to resist the urge to step back. "That will make this arrangement much more interesting." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a leather folder, placing it on the desk between them. "The contract. Everything you asked for is already there. I had it drawn up the moment you walked through my door. I knew you would say yes, Miss Wagner. You had no other choice." Isabel snatched up the folder, her hands shaking despite her best efforts to remain composed. She read through the contract quickly, her legal knowledge from undergraduate courses serving her well. It was exactly as he said, 1 year of service in exchange for the complete erasure of her father's debt. But there was a clause that made her blood run cold. "This says I have to live in your residence," she said, her voice tight. "You expect me to move into your home?" "My penthouse, to be precise," Victor corrected, gesturing to the windows and the sprawling Manhattan skyline beyond. "This building, top 3 floors. You will have your own suite, of course. Privacy when I permit it. But yes, you will live under my roof. How else can I ensure you are available whenever I require your services?" The way he said it made her stomach turn. But she had no choice. She thought of her father, probably drunk in their small apartment in Queens, oblivious to the deal being made for his life. She thought of the collectors who would come, the violence that would follow if she refused. 1 year, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And then I'm free. We're both free." 1 year, Victor agreed, extending his hand. "Do we have a deal, Miss Wagner?" Isabel looked at his hand, strong and scarred, the hand of a man who had built empires and destroyed lives. She thought about walking away, about running as fast and as far as she could. But where would she go? How would she protect her father? The chains were already around her neck. This was just making them official. She reached out and clasped his hand. His grip was firm, warm, possessive. "We have a deal," she said. Victor's smile widened, and for the first time, she saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Isabel. I have a feeling this year is going to be unforgettable. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe now and discover the ending of this and other thrilling and dramatic stories." The first week was a nightmare disguised as luxury. Victor's penthouse was a monument to excess and power, marble floors imported from Italy that felt like ice beneath her bare feet. Priceless art on the walls from masters whose names she had only read about in textbooks. Furniture that cost more than Isabel's entire education and looked like it belonged in a palace rather than a private residence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan, the city spreading out below like a glittering jewel box. Millions of lights representing millions of lives, none of them aware of the drama playing out in this tower high above them. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the building, connected by a private elevator and a spiral staircase that seemed to have been carved from a single piece of white marble. Every surface gleamed. Every corner was perfect. Every room a carefully curated display of wealth and taste. Her suite was larger than the apartment she had shared with her father in Queens. A cramped 2-bedroom in a building where the heat barely worked in winter, and the air conditioning never worked in summer, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments, and the hallways always smelled faintly of cooking oil and desperation. This suite, by contrast, was a study in opulence. A king-sized bed dominated the room, dressed in linens with a thread count she couldn't even fathom, soft as clouds and probably worth more than 3 months of her rent. A private bathroom featured a tub big enough to swim in, carved from what looked like a single piece of marble, with gold fixtures and a shower that had so many jets and settings she didn't know how to operate it properly. A walk-in closet, which Victor had already filled with designer clothes in her exact size, stretched the entire length of one wall, racks of dresses, suits, shoes, accessories, everything she could possibly need, and 1,000 things she never would have chosen for herself. "You will dress appropriately for your position," Victor had told her on that first day, his voice brooking no argument as he gestured to the racks of expensive clothes that represented more money than her father's debt. "You represent me now. Everything about you must be perfect. Your appearance, your demeanor, your speech. All of it reflects on me. When people look at you, they need to see power, sophistication, elegance. They need to see that you belong at my side, that you're worthy of the position I've given you. I've hired stylists to help you learn how to present yourself properly. They'll teach you about makeup, hair, fashion, etiquette, all the things you'll need to know to survive in my world." Perfect. The word echoed in her mind as she stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself in the emerald green dress that hugged her curves and fell to just above her knees. Her hair, which she usually wore in a simple ponytail, had been styled by Victor's personal hairstylist into soft waves that cascaded down her back. She wore makeup that made her eyes look wider, her lips fuller, transforming her from a graduate student into something else entirely. "You look acceptable," Victor said from the doorway, making her jump. He had a habit of appearing without warning like a ghost or a predator. "We have a dinner tonight. Important business. Associates. You will sit beside me, smile when appropriate, and speak only when spoken to. Do you understand?" Isabel turned to face him, her jaw tightening. "I understand that you think you own me. But let me make something clear, Mr. Blackwood. I agreed to work for you, not to be your puppet. I have a mind, a voice, and I won't be silenced just because you're paying off my father's debts." The room went cold. Victor's expression didn't change, but the air itself seemed to thicken with tension. He took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, masculine, intoxicating. His eyes bore into hers, and for a moment, she thought she had gone too far, that she had pushed the devil too hard. "You have courage," he said quietly, his voice a dangerous whisper. "Or perhaps you're just foolish. Most people who speak to me that way don't live long enough to regret it. Then I suppose I'm lucky you need me alive for the next." "Yeah," Isabel shot back, refusing to back down even though her heart was hammering in her chest. Victor stared at her for a long moment, and then something unexpected happened. He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, almost rusty, as if he didn't do it often. "You are either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most suicidal. I haven't decided which yet." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused, glancing back at her. "The car leaves in 10 minutes. Don't be late, Isabel. I despise tardiness." The dinner was held at one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, the kind of place where you needed to know someone who knew someone just to get a reservation. Isabel sat beside Victor at a table surrounded by men in expensive suits and women dripping in diamonds. They talked about things she didn't understand. Shipments, territories, investments that were clearly code for something illegal. She smiled when eyes turned her way, but inside she was screaming. "Tell me." "Victor," said a man named Adrian Wolfe, who sat across the table with a woman young enough to be his daughter hanging on his arm. "Where did you find such a lovely companion? She's quite a change from your usual preferences." Victor's hand found Isabel's under the table, his fingers wrapping around hers in a grip that was both possessive and warning. "Miss Wagner is my new personal assistant. Very talented. Very obedient." The word obedient was a challenge, a reminder of their agreement. But Isabel wasn't about to play along. She pulled her hand free from his grip, and met Adrian's gaze directly. "Actually, I'm a graduate student in art history. I'm working with Mr. Blackwood temporarily while I complete my dissertation on Renaissance portraiture." The table went silent. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but Isabel saw it. She had just contradicted him, undermined his authority in front of his associates. It was a dangerous move, perhaps a fatal one. But she refused to be reduced to nothing, refused to let him erase who she was. Adrian laughed, breaking the tension. "Beauty and brains. You're a lucky man, Victor. Though I wonder how long she'll last in your world. This business isn't kind to the educated." "She'll last," Victor said, his voice like iron. "She's stronger than she looks." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. When they finally left the restaurant and climbed into the back of Victor's Mercedes, Isabel braced herself for his anger. But instead, he remained silent, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. It wasn't until they were back in the elevator, ascending to the penthouse, that he finally spoke. "You made me look weak tonight," he said, his voice low and controlled, "in front of men who would kill me if they sensed any vulnerability. Do you understand what you did?" "I told the truth," Isabel replied, meeting his gaze in the reflection of the elevator's mirrored walls. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not even for you." The elevator doors opened into the penthouse, and Victor grabbed her arm, pulling her into the living room. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, unyielding. "You will learn your place, Isabel. You will learn that in my world, defiance equals death. I am trying to protect you, even if you're too stubborn to see it. Protect me." Isabel laughed bitterly, yanking her arm free. "You're using me. You're holding me hostage to pay for my father's mistakes. Don't pretend this is about protection. This is about control." Victor's eyes flashed with something dark and dangerous. "You know nothing about my world. Nothing about the things I've done to build this empire. The people I've destroyed to stay on top. You stand here in your designer dress, in the safety of my home, and you judge me. But without me, you would be nothing. Your father would be dead, and you would be at the mercy of men far worse than I am. And what makes you any different from them?" Isabel challenged, taking a step closer to him. "What makes you less of a monster?" The question hung between them, heavy and loaded. Victor stared at her, and for a moment she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, regret, something human buried beneath the layers of ice and steel. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask he always wore. "Nothing," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing makes me different. I am a monster." "Isabel, the sooner you accept that, the easier this year will be for both of us." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the vast living room, surrounded by luxury and emptiness. Isabel wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the penthouse. She had made a deal with the devil, and she was beginning to understand just how high the price would be. Days turned into weeks, and Isabel fell into a strange, suffocating routine. She managed Victor's schedule, fielded calls from people whose voices alone made her blood run cold, attended meetings where illegal deals were discussed with the casual ease of men ordering coffee. She learned to read Victor's moods, to anticipate his needs before he voiced them, to navigate the dangerous waters of his world with increasing skill. But she never stopped defying him. When he told her to stay silent during a meeting, she spoke up with suggestions that actually improved his business strategies. When he ordered her to wear a particular dress, she chose another, equally elegant but on her own terms. When he expected her to cower, she stood tall, met his gaze, and refused to bend. It infuriated him. It fascinated him. And slowly, imperceptibly, something began to shift between them. One night, 3 months into her servitude, Isabel found Victor in his study at 2 a.m. He sat behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. She had woken from a nightmare, something she'd been having frequently since moving into the penthouse. and had wandered the halls, unable to sleep. "Can't sleep?" Victor asked without looking up. "Nightmares," Isabel admitted, hovering in the doorway. She wore a simple nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face free of makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the polished assistant he paraded around during the day. "I have those too," Victor said, finally meeting her eyes. "Ghosts of men I've killed, faces of people I've destroyed. They visit me in the dark, remind me of what I am." Isabel walked into the study, drawn by the rawness in his voice. She had never heard him speak like this, never seen him without his armor. "Why do you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why build an empire on blood and fear?" Victor took a long sip of his whiskey, considering the question. "Because it's all I know. My father was a monster. He taught me that power is everything, that weakness is death. By the time I was old enough to question it, I was already too deep. Too many bodies, too many sins. There's no redemption for men like me, Isabel. There's only survival." She should have walked away. She should have retreated to her room and locked the door. But instead, she found herself sitting down in the chair across from his desk, watching him with something that wasn't quite pity but wasn't quite hate either. "Everyone has a choice," she said softly. "Every day you choose who you want to be. You could choose differently." "Could I?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Could I walk away from all of this? Could I be a different man? Or would the world I created drag me back down, destroy me for showing weakness?" He shook his head. "You don't understand, Isabel. In my world, kindness is death. Mercy is suicide. I am what I am because anything else would mean the end." "That's a coward's excuse," Isabel said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You hide behind this idea that you have no choice, but the truth is you're afraid of what it would mean to be vulnerable, to let someone see the man behind the monster." Victor slammed his glass down on the desk, the sound echoing through the study. "You know nothing about fear. You sit in your ivory tower of moral superiority, judging me for the choices I've made to survive. But when your father needed help, when you needed to save him, you made a deal with the devil. You became part of this world. So tell me, Isabel, what does that make you?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Because he was right. She had judged him, condemned him, while accepting the benefits of his protection. She had made a deal, had agreed to live in his world, had become complicit in everything he did. What did that make her? "It makes me trapped," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Just like you." The anger drained from Victor's face, replaced by something that looked almost like understanding. He stood and walked around the desk, and for a moment, Isabel thought he might touch her, might offer some gesture of comfort. But he stopped just short of her chair, his hands clenched at his sides. "Go to bed, Isabel," he said, his voice weary. "Tomorrow is another day of the devil's work." She left without another word, but something had changed between them that night. A crack had appeared in Victor's armor, and she had seen something human beneath the surface. It terrified her more than his cruelty ever had. Already subscribed? Leave a like and tell us where you're watching from. We want to know where our audience comes from. The next day brought a new crisis. Victor received word that one of his shipments had been intercepted by a rival gang, led by a man named Damian Petrov. Damian was ruthless, ambitious, and eager to challenge Victor's dominance in New York's underworld. The loss of the shipment was more than a financial blow. It was a challenge, a declaration of war. "I want you with me." "Tonight," Victor told Isabel as they stood in his office. "We're meeting with Damian to negotiate. It won't be pleasant, but I need you there." "Why?" Isabel asked, suspicious. "What possible use could I be in a meeting between criminals?" Victor's smile was cold. "Because Damian has a weakness for beautiful women. He'll be distracted by you, focused on impressing you rather than on the game we're playing. You're a weapon, Isabel, whether you realize it or not." The thought of being used as bait made her skin crawl, but she had no choice. That night, dressed in a black dress that Victor had chosen specifically for its effect. She accompanied him to a warehouse in Brooklyn. The building was old, abandoned, the perfect setting for the kind of meeting that could end in bloodshed. Damian Petrov was younger than she expected, maybe 30, with dark hair and eyes that held a predatory gleam. He looked at Isabel the way a wolf looks at prey, and she had to resist the urge to hide. Behind Victor. "Blackwood," Damian said, his accent thick. "I see you brought entertainment. How thoughtful." "Miss Wagner is my assistant," Victor said coolly. "She's here to observe, nothing more." "Of course," Damian replied, his smile widening. "Beautiful and intelligent. You have good taste, my friend." The meeting was tense, filled with veiled threats and posturing. Damian wanted compensation for the shipment he'd stolen, a cut of Victor's territory, and guarantees of safe passage for his operations. Victor countered with threats of his own, reminders of his power and reach. It was a chess game played with guns instead of pieces, and Isabel sat silently, watching it unfold. But then Damian made a mistake. He reached across the table and grabbed Isabel's hand, his fingers sliding over her skin in a way that made her recoil. "Perhaps," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, "we could negotiate a different kind of deal. One that includes her." Victor moved so fast that Isabel barely saw it. One moment he was sitting calmly. The next, he had Damian pinned against the wall, a gun pressed under his chin. The room erupted into chaos, Damian's men reaching for their weapons, Victor's security detail doing the same. But Victor's voice cut through it all, cold and lethal. "Touch her again," he hissed, his face inches from Damian's, "and I will end you. I will burn down everything you've built. I will make you watch as I destroy everyone you've ever cared about. And then, only then will I grant you the mercy of death." Damian's face had gone pale, his bravado crumbling in the face of Victor's rage. "I meant no disrespect," he stammered. "I didn't know." "Now you know," Victor said, releasing him and stepping back. "Our business is concluded. You will return the shipment, pay for the damages, and stay the hell out of my territory. If I see your face again, I won't be so generous." They left the warehouse in tense silence, Victor's security forming a protective barrier around them as they walked to the car. Isabel's hands were shaking, her mind reeling from what had just happened. Victor had defended her. More than that, he had shown genuine rage at the thought of someone else touching her. In the car, she finally found her voice. "You didn't have to do that. I can handle men like Damian." "No," Victor said sharply, his eyes fixed on the passing city lights. "You can't. Men like him don't see strength in women like you. They see weakness, something to exploit. And I won't." He stopped himself, his jaw clenching. "I won't allow anyone to harm what's mine." "I'm not yours," Isabel said automatically, but the words felt hollow, even as she spoke them. Victor turned to look at her, his eyes intense in the dim light of the car. "For this year, you are. Whether you accept it or not, whether you hate me for it or not, you are under my protection, and I protect what's mine." There was something in his voice, something that made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't just about the contract, about ownership or control. There was something deeper, something more complicated, and that terrified her more than anything else that had happened that night. Back at the penthouse, Isabel went straight to her room, needing space to process everything. But sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the scene in the warehouse, the look on Victor's face when Damian had touched her, the raw fury in his voice. No one had ever defended her like that. No one had ever looked at her with that kind of intensity. A knock on her door startled her out of her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting one of the staff. But it was Victor who entered, still dressed in his suit from the meeting, his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled. He looked different, almost vulnerable, and Isabel sat up in bed, pulling the covers around her. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, hovering near the door. Tonight was intense. I'm fine, Isabel lied, though her voice betrayed her. Victor crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed, a move that was both inappropriate and strangely intimate. You handled yourself well. Most people would have fallen apart in that situation. I'm not most people, Isabel said, echoing his own words from months ago. A small smile touched Victor's lips. No, you're not. You're extraordinary, Isabel. Strong, brave, defiant. You challenge me in ways no one else dares. You see me as more than just a monster, and that's dangerous. Dangerous for who? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For both of us, Victor admitted. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle in a way she had never experienced from him. I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things. But when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope, maybe. Or the possibility of redemption. Isabel's breath caught in her throat. This was dangerous territory. A line they shouldn't cross. But she found herself leaning into his touch, drawn to the vulnerability in his eyes. Victor, I should go, he said abruptly, standing up. Before I do something we'll both regret. He walked to the door, then paused. Sleep well, Isabel. Tomorrow we have a charity gala to attend, another performance. He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Isabel was alone once more. But her heart was racing, her skin still tingling from where he had touched her. Something was changing between them, something that went beyond the contract, beyond the arrangement they had made, and she didn't know whether to run from it or embrace it. The months continued to pass, and the tension between Victor and Isabel grew more unbearable with each day, like a violin string pulled tighter and tighter until it was about to snap. They danced around each other, caught in a web of attraction and denial, desire and fear that neither of them knew how to navigate. There were moments, brief, stolen moments, when their hands would brush accidentally and electricity would arc between them, when they would catch each other's gaze across a crowded room and the rest of the world would fade away. When Victor would say something unexpectedly kind, or when Isabel would laugh at one of his rare attempts at humor, and for just a second, they would both forget the circumstances that had brought them together. Victor became more protective, more possessive, watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead made her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced. He anticipated her needs before she voiced them, ensured her safety with a vigilance that bordered on obsessive, and gradually, imperceptibly, the walls he had built around himself began to crumble in her presence. While Isabel found herself caring about him in ways she knew were dangerous, found herself lying awake at night, thinking about the man behind the monster, wondering what had shaped him into who he was, and whether redemption was possible for someone who had done the things he had done. But life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges when you least expect them, cruel twists of fate that change everything in an instant. And Isabel's came in the form of a missed period. At first, she told herself it was stress. The past months had been traumatic beyond anything she could have imagined, a roller coaster of fear and confusion and unexpected emotion that would be enough to throw any woman's cycle off. Her body's response to constant tension and fear was understandable, explainable, nothing to worry about. But as the weeks passed and her period still didn't come, as morning after morning she woke up feeling nauseated and dizzy, as her breasts became tender and her clothes started to feel tighter around her waist, the truth became impossible to ignore. She bought a pregnancy test in secret, sneaking out early one morning when she knew Victor would be in meetings, going to a pharmacy far from the penthouse, where no one would recognize her. She wore sunglasses and a scarf, feeling ridiculous and paranoid, but unable to shake the feeling that she was being watched, that Victor's reach extended everywhere, and he would somehow know what she was doing. She took the test back to the penthouse in a plain brown bag, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it, and locked herself in her bathroom with instructions she had read online, but couldn't quite process. She sat on the cold tile floor, the test clutched in her shaking hands like a grenade with the pin pulled, and watched as two pink lines appeared with cruel clarity, confirming her worst fear, transforming her life once again in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend. She was pregnant. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence, heavy with implications and consequences she wasn't ready to face. The baby couldn't be Victor's. They had never been intimate, had never crossed that final line despite the electricity between them, despite the desire that crackled in the air whenever they were alone together. They had kissed once a few weeks ago, after too much wine at a business dinner. It had been explosive, passionate, a kiss that had promised so much more. But Victor had pulled away, his face conflicted, and had said, "Not like this, not while you're bound to me by contract. When we cross that line, Isabel, it will be because you choose it." Freely, not because you have no choice. She had respected him for that, had been frustrated and grateful in equal measure. So no, the baby wasn't Victor's, which meant it was Gabriel's, her ex-boyfriend, the man she had been with before everything had fallen apart. Gabriel Carson, who had seemed so charming and attentive in the beginning, who had swept her off her feet with fancy dinners and romantic gestures, who had told her he loved her and wanted to build a future with her. Gabriel, who had disappeared from her life 2 months into her arrangement with Victor, who had sent a single text message saying he couldn't handle her situation and that it was best if they cut ties cleanly. She had tried to call him, had sent dozens of messages, had gone to his apartment only to find he had moved without telling her. He had simply erased her from his life, as if their relationship had meant nothing, as if she had meant nothing. And now she was carrying his child. Isabel sat on that bathroom floor, the test still clutched in her trembling hands, and let the tears flow freely. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body, that felt like they were tearing her apart from the inside. She cried for herself, for the life she had lost, for the dreams that kept slipping further away. She cried for her father, whose addiction had led her to this moment, to this impossible situation. She cried for the baby growing inside her, innocent and unaware of the chaos it was being born into. And she cried for Victor, for the man who had shown her unexpected kindness, who had protected her and cared for her in his own complicated way, who didn't deserve to have this complication thrust into his life. How could she possibly tell him? How could she explain that she was pregnant with another man's child while living under his roof, bound to him by contract, developing feelings for him that she couldn't quite name or acknowledge? He would be furious, disgusted, disappointed. He would send her away, void the contract, leave her father to face the consequences of his debts. Or worse, he would keep her, but treat her with contempt, a constant reminder of her mistakes and poor judgments. The thought of seeing disgust in his eyes, of losing the fragile connection they had built, made her feel physically ill. She managed to hide it for a few weeks, calling it the flu when the morning sickness became too severe to conceal entirely, wearing slightly looser clothes to disguise the subtle changes in her body, avoiding Victor as much as possible to prevent him from reading the truth in her face. But eventually, Victor noticed. He always noticed everything. It was one of the things that made him so dangerous and so effective in his world. Nothing escaped his attention, no detail too small to register, no change too subtle to catch. "You've been sick in the mornings," he said one day, as they sat in his office, reviewing contracts. "You barely eat. You look exhausted." "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Isabel lied, keeping her eyes on the papers in front of her. Victor reached across the desk and tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Don't lie to me, Isabel. I've become very good at reading you. Something is wrong. Tell me." The concern in his voice broke something inside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she could stop herself, the truth came spilling out. "I'm pregnant. It's not yours. It's Gabriel's, my ex. He left me when this all started, and now I'm carrying his baby, and I don't know what to do." Victor's hand dropped from her chin, his face going blank. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Isabel braced herself for his anger, his rejection, his disgust. But when he finally spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Does he know? No, and I'm not going to tell him. He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. Victor stood and walked to the window, his back to her. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Isabel waited, her heart hammering, wondering if this would be the thing that finally broke whatever fragile connection had formed between them. "You'll stay here," Victor said finally, his voice firm. "You'll continue working for me, and when the baby comes, you'll have the best medical care money can buy. That child will want for nothing. Do you understand?" Isabel stared at his back, stunned. You're not angry?" Victor turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Why would I be angry? You made no promises of fidelity to me. You owe me a year of service, nothing more. But I'm not a monster, Isabel, despite what you think. I won't abandon you when you need help." The kindness in his words made her cry harder. She had expected rejection, cruelty even. But instead, he was offering her protection, security, the things Gabriel had denied her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what else to say." "Don't thank me yet," Victor said, something dark flashing in his eyes. "This Gabriel, where is he now?" "I don't know. He blocked my number, cut off all contact. Why?" Victor's jaw tightened. "No reason, just curious." But Isabel knew him well enough by now to recognize when he was lying. There was something calculating in his expression, something dangerous. She wanted to ask, to demand answers, but fear kept her silent. That night, Victor made a phone call. "I need information," he said to the man on the other end, someone he trusted implicitly. "Gabriel Carson. He lives somewhere in Manhattan. I want to know where he works, where he lives, who he sees, everything. And I want it yesterday." Within 24 hours, Victor had a file on his desk. Gabriel Carson, age 29, investment banker, currently dating a socialite named Caroline Fletcher. He lived in a luxury apartment in Tribeca, frequented expensive clubs, and had a reputation for using and discarding women. Reading through the file, Victor felt his anger building. This was the man who had gotten Isabel pregnant and then abandoned her. This was the man who had left her to face the consequences alone. Victor made a decision. 3 days later, Gabriel Carson disappeared. He had been leaving his office late at night when a black van pulled up beside him. Men in masks grabbed him, threw him inside, and drove away before anyone could intervene. When Gabriel woke, he was tied to a chair in a dark warehouse, his head throbbing, his vision blurry. "Hello, Gabriel," said a voice from the shadows. Victor stepped into the dim light, his face expressionless. "We need to have a conversation about Isabel Wagner." Gabriel's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Victor said coldly. "You dated her. You got her pregnant. And then you abandoned her like the coward you are. Did you think there would be no consequences? Did you think you could just walk away?" "Look, man, I didn't know about the baby," Gabriel stammered. "And even if I did, it's not my problem. She knew the risks." The punch came so fast that Gabriel didn't have time to brace for it. Victor's fist connected with his jaw, snapping his head back, blood spraying from his mouth. "Wrong answer," Victor said, his voice deadly calm. "Try again." "Please," Gabriel begged, tears streaming down his face. "I'll pay child support. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't kill me." "Child support?" Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think money solves this? You left her when she needed you most. You threw her away like garbage, and now she's carrying your child, terrified and alone, because of you." "I'm sorry," Gabriel sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it." Victor grabbed Gabriel's hair, forcing him to look up. "You should have thought about that before you abandoned her, but it's too late now. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." "What are you going to do to me?" Gabriel, Sue, asked, his voice breaking. Victor leaned in close, his eyes cold and merciless. "I'm going to make sure you never hurt her again." I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone again." The shot echoed through the warehouse, final and absolute. Just one click. Subscribe, leave a like, and say where you're watching from. Your support is essential for our growth. Isabel knew something was wrong when she saw the news flash across her phone while having breakfast in the penthouse kitchen. "Investment banker found dead in apparent gang violence," the headline read, the words stark and brutal against the white background of the news app. Gabriel's photo stared out at her from the screen, professional headshot from his firm's website, his smile confident and carefree, completely unaware that he was already dead when the picture was taken. Her coffee cup fell from her nerveless fingers, shattering on the marble floor in an explosion of porcelain and dark liquid that seemed to mirror the destruction of her world. Her blood turned to ice in her veins, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She read the article with shaking hands, each word burning itself into her brain. Gabriel Carson, 29, found shot execution style in an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. No witnesses, no suspects. Police were investigating connections to organized crime, though Carson had no known ties to criminal enterprises. The killing bore all the hallmarks of a professional hit, single shot to the back of the head, body positioned in a way that sent a message. The article speculated about gambling debts, business dealings gone wrong, a dozen different theories that all circled around the truth without ever quite landing on it. But Isabel knew. She knew with a certainty that made her want to scream, to tear down the walls around her, to run as far and as fast as she could. There was only one person who would have reason to kill Gabriel. Only one person. With the means and the motivation and the complete lack of conscience required to order someone's execution. She had lived with that person for months now, had eaten meals with him, had laughed at his jokes, had felt herself falling for him, despite knowing what he was capable of. And now he had killed the father of her child, had ended a life as casually as someone might swat a fly, and had probably slept soundly that night without a single regret. She found Victor in his study, the same place. They had shared that vulnerable conversation months ago, the room where she had first seen glimpses of the man beneath the monster. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the dust motes dance in the air like tiny stars, an incongruously beautiful backdrop for the confrontation that was about to unfold. He looked up when she entered, his expression neutral and professional, his business face, the mask he wore when dealing with his empire. But when he saw her face, saw the phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip and the devastation in her eyes, something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, exactly, but acknowledgement. He knew she knew. "You killed him," she said, her voice shaking with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Anger, grief, betrayal, all of it swirling together into a toxic cocktail that threatened to choke her. It wasn't a question. She wasn't asking for confirmation or denial. She was stating a fact, laying it bare between them like a corpse on an examination table. Victor set down the glass of whiskey he had been nursing, expensive single malt that probably cost more per ounce than most people made in an hour, and his gaze never left hers, never wavered or shifted away. "Yes," he said simply, offering no excuses, no explanations, no attempts to soften the blow of that single syllable. Just the truth, stark and brutal and undeniable. "Why?" The word came out as a sob, her composure cracking like fragile glass under pressure. She wanted to hate him, wanted to feel nothing but revulsion and horror at what he had done. But beneath the anger and shock, there was confusion, a desperate need to understand how the man she had come to care for could commit such a monstrous act. "I never asked you to. I never wanted. He abandoned you," Victor interrupted, his voice hard as iron, each word precise and deliberate, delivered with the certainty of a man who had made his decision and would stand by it regardless of the consequences. "He left you pregnant and alone. He threw you away like you were nothing, like the time you spent together meant nothing, like the child you're carrying, his child, was an inconvenience he could simply walk away from. He deserved to die, Isabel. Men like him, who take what they want and discard the rest, who have no honor, no integrity, no sense of responsibility for the consequences of their actions. They don't deserve to breathe. They don't deserve to walk this earth while better people suffer for their mistakes. You had no right, Isabel screamed, her carefully maintained composure shattering completely, months of tension and fear and confusion erupting in a torrent of emotion she couldn't control. Tears streamed down her face, hot and bitter, blurring her vision until Victor was just a dark shape across the room. No right to make that decision. That was my past, my choice to handle. You don't get to play God with people's lives. You don't get to decide who lives and who dies based on your twisted sense of justice. Victor stood, his full height imposing and overwhelming in the confines of the study, his shadow falling across her like a judgment. His face was like stone, carved from granite, showing no emotion, no regret, no hint of the humanity she had glimpsed in their private moments. I have every right. You are under my protection, and I will do whatever is necessary to keep you safe, to ensure that no one ever harms you, or uses you, or throws you away ever again. Gabriel was a threat. Not a physical threat, perhaps, but a threat nonetheless. He knew about your pregnancy, knew about your situation here, knew things that could have been used against us, against you. And even if he never intended to use that information, even if he had every intention of staying away and never contacting you again, the simple fact of his existence was a danger I couldn't allow. He was the father of my child, Isabel cried, her voice breaking on the last word, the reality of it hitting her like a physical blow. Whether I hated him or not, whether he deserved it or not, he was the biological father. And now my baby will never know. Will never have the chance to... She broke off, unable to continue, unable to articulate the complicated grief she felt for a man she had stopped loving months ago, but who had still been important, who had still been part of her story. Victor stood, his face like stone. I have every right. You are under my protection, and I will do whatever is necessary to keep you safe. Gabriel was a threat. He was the father of my child, Isabel cried. Whether I hated him or not, whether he deserved it or not, he was the father. And now my baby will never know. She broke off, unable to continue. Victor's expression softened slightly, something like regret flickering across his face. Your child will know a father, he said quietly. A father who will never abandon them, never leave them wanting. I will be that father, Isabel, if you'll let me. The words hung in the air, impossible and yet somehow perfect. Isabel stared at him, this man who had killed for her, this monster who was offering to raise another man's child. You're insane, she whispered. You're absolutely insane. Perhaps, Victor agreed, but I'm also in love with you. I have been for months, maybe from the moment you walked into my office and refused to bow. You've changed me, Isabel. You've made me want to be better, to be worthy of you. And I know I can never truly be worthy. I'm too stained, too broken, but I can protect you. I can love you. I can be a father to your child, if you'll give me the chance. Isabel's legs gave out, and she sank into a chair, her mind reeling. Victor loved her. The man who had owned her, controlled her, turned her life upside down. He loved her. And despite everything, despite the violence and the darkness and the terrible things he'd done, she realized she loved him too. Somewhere along the way, in the midst of their battles and their stolen moments, she had fallen for the man behind the monster. You killed Gabriel, she said again. But this time there was less anger in her voice, more confusion. You murdered him. I did, Victor confirmed, kneeling in front of her chair. And I would do it again. I would do anything to protect you, to ensure that you and your child are safe. That's what love is, Isabel. At least, that's the only kind of love I know how to give. That's not love, Isabel said, but her voice lacked conviction. Love is supposed to be gentle, kind. Love is sacrifice. Victor interrupted. Love is doing whatever it takes to keep the people you care about safe, even if it damns your soul. I'm already damned, Isabel. I've been damned since I was a child. But maybe, if you let me love you, if you let me be the father your child deserves, maybe I can find some kind of redemption. Isabel looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. He was simply offering her everything he had, darkness and all, and asking if it was enough. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said honestly. I don't know if what you did was right or wrong, but I know that I love you, Victor. Against all logic, against every instinct that tells me to run, I love you, and that terrifies me more than anything. Victor's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. Then be terrified with me. Stay with me. Not because of a contract or a debt, but because you choose to. Be my wife, Isabel. Let me be the father to your child. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you're giving me. You want to marry me? Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. More than I've ever wanted anything, Victor said. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. Our life will be complicated, dangerous sometimes. But I swear to you, I will protect you with everything I have. I will love you until my last breath. And I will never, ever abandon you. The choice should have been impossible. But as Isabel looked at Victor, this man who had begun as her captor and become something so much more complicated, she realized the choice had already been made. Somewhere between the defiance and the vulnerability, between the hatred and the understanding, she had made her decision. Yes, she said, the word barely audible. Yes, I'll marry you. Victor's relief was palpable. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. Isabel clung to him, this impossible man who had turned her world upside down and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The remaining months of her pregnancy passed in a blur. Victor was attentive, protective to the point of obsession. He hired the best doctors, transformed one of the penthouse's rooms into a nursery, and attended every appointment with her. He read books on parenting, awkwardly at first, then with increasing confidence. He talked to her belly when he thought she was asleep, promising the baby that he would be the best father he could be, that he would protect them from the darkness of his world. They married in a small private ceremony in the penthouse, just the two of them and an officiant. Isabel wore a simple white dress, her belly round with the baby that would arrive in just a few weeks. Victor wore a suit, his eyes never leaving her face as they exchanged vows that felt sacred despite the unconventional circumstances. I promise to love you, Victor said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. To protect you, to honor you, to be the man you deserve, even when I fall short. You are my light in the darkness, Isabel. You are my redemption. Isabel's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. I promise to love you, Victor. To see the man you are beneath the monster you think you have to be. To stand beside you. To challenge you. To be your partner in all things. You saved me, even as I saved you. When Victor kissed her, sealing their promises, Isabel felt something shift in the universe. They were married, bound together in ways that went far beyond the contract that had brought them together. They were a family now, or at least they would be soon. The baby came on a stormy night, much like the night Isabel had first walked into Victor's office. Labor was long and difficult, but Victor never left her side, holding her hand, whispering, "Ooh," encouragement, looking more terrified than she had ever seen him. When the baby finally arrived, a perfect little girl with dark hair and green eyes, Victor held her with such tenderness that Isabel's heart ached. "She's beautiful," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect. What should we name her?" Isabel asked, exhausted but happy. Victor looked down at the tiny face, this innocent life that he would now protect with everything he had. "Hope," he said. "We'll name her Hope, because that's what she is. Our hope for something better, something pure in the midst of darkness." Isabel smiled through her tears, reaching up to touch Victor's face. "Hope Constantine Blackwood. It's perfect. In the months that followed, Victor proved himself to be an extraordinary father. He woke for midnight feedings, changed diapers without complaint, and sang lullabies in Russian, his voice soft and gentle in ways that would have shocked anyone who knew him in the business world. He was still a dangerous man, still involved in things that would horrify most people. But with Isabel and Hope, he was different. He was trying to be better. Isabel's father, Johannes, had recovered from his addiction with the help of the treatment program Victor had quietly arranged. He visited often, sober and grateful, building a relationship with his granddaughter, and slowly earning back his daughter's trust. The debt that had brought Isabel into Victor's life was long forgotten, replaced by something more precious than money or power. One evening, as they sat in the nursery watching Hope sleep, Victor turned to Isabel with an expression of wonder. "I never thought I could have this," he admitted. "A family, love, peace. I thought I was too far gone, too damaged. But you gave me a second chance, Isabel. You and Hope. You're my everything." Isabel leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his. "We saved each other," she said. "You were right that first night. This year was unforgettable, but not for the reasons either of us expected." "No," Victor agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It was so much more." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. The world outside was still dark, still dangerous, still full of monsters. But in that moment, in the soft glow of the nursery, they had found something rare and precious: redemption, love, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The contract that had bound them together had expired months ago, but Isabel had never left. She had chosen to stay, not because of obligation or fear, but because of love. And that choice, that simple act of faith, had transformed both of their lives. Victor Constantine Blackwood, the man who had once been nothing but ice and steel, had learned to love. And Isabel Wagner, the woman who had walked into his office with defiance in her eyes, had learned that sometimes the most beautiful things bloom in the darkest places. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, complicated, born from violence and control. But it was real, and it was theirs. And it was worth every moment of struggle. As Hope stirred in her crib, making soft baby sounds, Victor reached down and gently picked her up, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he whispered to her. "I'll always protect you. I'll always be here." Isabel watched them, her husband and her daughter, and felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. They had started in darkness, but they had found their way to light. And that, she realized, was the greatest triumph of all. Years would pass, and their lives would continue to evolve. Victor would slowly transition his business away from the underworld, using his wealth and influence to build legitimate enterprises and support causes that mattered. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be setbacks. But he would do it for his family, for the woman who had shown him a different path, and the daughter who depended on him to be better. Isabel would finish her doctorate, eventually opening a gallery in Manhattan that showcased emerging artists. She would use her position and her husband's connections to create opportunities for people who, like her, had found themselves trapped by circumstances beyond their control. She would become a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope in a city that could be so cruel. And Hope would grow up surrounded by love, protected fiercely but allowed to be her own person. She would never know the full truth of how her parents had come together, of the violence and darkness that had preceded her birth. But she would know that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to two people who had needed each other more than they could have imagined. The story that had begun with a contract, with control and obligation and desperation, had transformed into something beautiful. It had become a love story, unconventional and imperfect, but real and lasting. Victor and Isabel had found each other in the darkness, and together they had created their own light. As Victor held Hope, swaying gently while she drifted back to sleep, he looked over at Isabel and smiled, A real smile, warm and genuine, nothing like the cold expressions he had worn when they first met. "Thank you," he said simply, "for taking a chance on me, for seeing something worth saving." "Thank you," Isabel replied, "for fighting your demons, for choosing us, for becoming the man I knew you could be." They stood together in the nursery, a family forged in fire and darkness, but sustained by love and hope. The storm that had raged when they first met had passed, leaving behind something precious and worth protecting. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of their daughter's breathing and the warmth of each other's presence, Victor and Isabel knew that they had finally found what they had been searching for all along. Not just love, but home. A place where they belonged, where they were accepted despite their flaws, where they could be themselves without fear or pretense. The past would always be there, lurking in the shadows, reminding them of the choices they had made and the paths they had walked. But the future stretched out before them, bright and full of possibility, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of their choosing. Victor had been a monster, and perhaps part of him always would be. But with Isabel and hope, he was also a husband and a father, a man trying every day to be worthy of the love he had been given. And that, in the end, was all anyone could ask for. The chance to be better than yesterday, to love more than you thought possible, to find redemption in the most unexpected places. As the city lights twinkled beyond the windows of the penthouse, casting their glow over the sleeping child and her parents, a new story began. Not the story of a contract or an obligation, not the story of violence and control, but the story of a family, imperfect, unconventional, but bound together by something stronger than any agreement or threat. They had survived the darkness. Now together, they would walk into the light. The year that had begun with a whispered command, "You will obey me for 1 year," had ended with a promise made in love, "I will love you for all the years to come." And in the transformation from one to the other, two broken people had found wholeness, 2 lost souls had found home, and 1 innocent child had found a father who would move heaven and earth to protect her. Victor had not expected Isabel to defy him, to challenge him, to change him so completely. But she had, and in doing so, she had saved them both. Because love, real love, isn't about obedience or control. It's about choice. And every day, Victor and Isabel chose each other, chose their family, chose hope over darkness. And that choice, made over and over again, was what made their story not just a tale of survival, but a testament to the power of love to transform even the darkest hearts. From the penthouse overlooking Manhattan, their light shone out into the night, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt lost, trapped, or beyond redemption. Because if Victor Constantine Blackwood could find his way back from the darkness, if Isabel Wagner could find strength in the midst of adversity, if 2 people from completely different worlds could build a family and a future together, then perhaps there was hope for everyone. And in the end, hope was the most powerful thing of all.